Alrighty, I think it's about time for us to get started. First and foremost, hello, and thank you for joining us for the first Magically Live event, where today we'll be discussing invisible disabilities. Magically Live is a series of events that we'll be hosting every month, in which we'll pick one accessibility topic and take a deep dive into it and how we can help. My name is MagicA11y, and today I'm joined by two of Magic EdTech's wonderful accessibility experts, Erin and Tarveen. Erin?
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Evans. I'm our Director of Accessibility here at Magic, and I'm so excited that you all have joined us today. Thank you for taking the time to come and join us for our first event. Tarveen?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Magic EdTech first ever live series, Magically Live. I'm Tarveen. I head accessibility practice at Magic. We welcome you all to the session and would like to thank you all for all the contribution that you guys have done to the LE world.
Alrighty, so to start off, we're just going to do a quick little poll to kind of get an idea of how many of you know about invisible disabilities to start. So this poll says, which of these is considered an invisible disability? And you guys can go ahead and submit your answers. Alrighty, so the answer to this poll is actually that all of them are considered invisible disabilities. Erin, would you like to go a little bit into that?
Absolutely. Before I jump into going through this poll, I wanted to run through a couple of housekeeping items for our participants today. If you have questions as we're going through our conversation, please utilize the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the screen. If you want to share anything in the chat, please do. That's open to everyone. And we do have our captions going through, so the live captions through Zoom are available. If you're not seeing them, hopefully you have the latest version of Zoom, but if you should be able to access those at the bottom through the live transcript button. So, and thank you for the first what they are and how we can plan for them as we're doing. So, based on the poll results, most of you answered that the last item on there was not an invisible disability, which it was an invisible disability. And the truth is, as Ange said, all of those are invisible disabilities. Thank you for putting that back up. It jumped off my screen. So ADHD was the most popular vote here, but dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and chronic illness. Those are all examples of invisible disabilities. And from the invisibledisabilities.org website, an invisible disability is defined as a mental, physical, or neurological condition that is not visible from the outside that can limit or challenge a person's movements, senses, or activities. And the reason that we're reading specifically from that association is because it can be defined in multiple ways. But the important thing to consider is that it is exactly as it sounds, something you can't see just by looking at somebody. So when you're talking about invisible disabilities in the world of accessibility, anybody could have a disability. They may know about it, they may not. They might look perfectly, quote unquote, normal and have sorry, I just got a note that my internet is slightly unstable. They could have a disability that they're not aware of. So when you're considering people on the street, people that you see with a service dog or a leader dog, doesn't necessarily mean that they have a vision impairment. It could be that they have PTSD, or they have social anxiety, something that is impairing the way that they are able to move forward. So when you see something or see someone, you don't automatically know if they have a disability or not.
Thank you so much for that, Erin. Tarveen, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I would completely echo to what Erin said. I just wanted to add that I read one of the quote that says that I have invisible disability, but I am not invisible. The reason we picked up this topic is the impact that makes while we talk about any product. When it is accessible, we always say that, is it accessible to people who are visually impaired, who have hearing impairment, but we don't end up talking about invisible disabilities. So that plays a very vital role. And I would thank that VOCAC 2.2 is coming really soon. The VOCAC 2.2 covers most of the guidelines that will ensure that people with invisible disabilities are being covered and taken into consideration. All the accommodations that are needed to make the product compliant for any kind of invisible disability will fall under the new guidelines that will be there as part of VOCAC 2.2.
Absolutely.
One thing to add on to that too is, 10% of people have an invisible disability. And as I mentioned, they may not know it. And again, it doesn't matter. I think that's really the most important thing, is it does not matter what kind of abilities a person has. Everybody has abilities to do amazing things. And from a digital perspective, when we're building products and looking at how to remediate products, it's really important to keep all abilities in mind as we're going through things, because as Tarveen just said, I might have an invisible disability, but I'm not invisible. And it's really important that we take our users into consideration, because everybody is here trying to learn the same information. And our goal from a digital perspective is to remove as many barriers as possible so that everybody is able to get to the information that they are looking for.
Absolutely. Tarveen, why would you say that invisible disabilities get missed, and what are some of the implications of missing them?
So the biggest reason I think of missing the invisible disability is the mindset and the growth vision. And when we say the growth vision, I think our company vision needs to be aligned to accessibility in order to ensure, yes, accessibility is taken into consideration. Anjali, have you ever thought that a design audit is being done after the product has been created?
Right, absolutely.
Yes, I think absolutely not. Similar way, accessibility needs to be taken at the first stage of the product development. Why don't we include people with disabilities for whom we are building up the product? Getting the design reviewed by them, ensuring that we have accessibility in place, our design is being done right, is when we need to ensure, yes, we are taking care of invisible disabilities and we are not missing on any of the item while building up the product. And I'll share one example with you guys, is that I was reading one of the blog that was published by the university. They did a survey and figured out that the entire class is being impacted by visible or invisible disabilities. And what they did is they accommodated all the requests to ensure that they have passed on all the required information to all the students learning in the classroom. Now, when we say how they did it, the two key things that they implemented is using a smart pen, which is called LiveScribe. I think many of you might not be aware of LiveScribe. That's a smart pen. Now, what it does is it records the entire session in form of audio. Wherever you are, you pick up the small, just do the quick note down of the notes. And when you are at home, as per your convenience, you just put up your pen on that particular content and it will start reading the notes from the classroom. Now think how easy it is for me to go through the session again as per my convenience. If I am a person who is having dyslexia, I will not be able to absorb everything at one go. If I am suffering from chronic illness, might be I'm not the right person to note down everything at that particular moment. I'm not working with full energy during the day, which is absolutely okay. Why to leave those people back when you have the alternative solutions and accommodations? Similar way, they implemented the dragon speech. Now, dragon speech really helps us when we say that we are in a classroom, we are recording, we just switch on the dragon speech, it will record and convert it into a text. Now, how easy we are making life of people with disabilities. So if we have everything at the first scope placed out in our process, I think we'll be at the right stage. And one thing we need to remember, sorry, Erin, one thing we need to remember is that nothing comes with the ease. Everything needs to be done step by step. Similar way, accessibility needs to be moved step by step when you're doing any product, any content, anything that you want to deliver and pass on to the users. Go ahead, Erin.
And what I was going to say is, you brought up in that conversation some examples of invisible disabilities with a chronic illness or with dysgraphia, where it's hard to write, or dysgraphia is hard to write, dyslexia harder to read. There are other examples of invisible disabilities, and there are many. Include something like a traumatic brain injury, which it could impair the way that you are able to process things. It could just be a processing disorder. It could be an auditory processing disorder. If you go to the invisibledisabilities.org website, there are a lot of examples on there, but I think, to your point and to what we were saying, is there are a variety of illnesses out there that are now considered, that are things that people have been living with for a long time, and there's more awareness around these being barriers, and more importantly, what we can do to help remove those. As we mentioned, you were talking about some of the specific assistive technology tools out there, which are fantastic, and I want to bring up that there are already tools that may have been developed for a specific disability, and one example would be something like captions on a video, closed captions. And those were intended to support those who have hearing disabilities. But the advantage is that somebody who might have an auditory processing disorder or does better by reading something, they can read and see what's happening. Additionally, a transcript from that same video allows somebody who has a hard time reading or a hard time remembering information, they can go back at their own time, in their own pace, to review the information and have the ability to take in what they need, because they may have missed some key points by no fault of their own, but there are these ways out there that we can support their, what their learning is. So we're, again, utilizing the technologies that are available and utilizing the accessibility options out there to support more than one group at a time. And that's really, accessibility is for everyone, right? When you make something accessible, you are benefiting everyone regardless of their abilities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, ladies. Ashok, I do see that you have a question. We are going to address all attendee questions after we have our initial discussion. But if you guys think of anything throughout this time, you can absolutely drop them and we will discuss them afterward. So, Erin, what are some best practices that we should follow while considering invisible disabilities?
Sure. So those of you who are here, we're all here because we're part of the accessibility community, and we have knowledge of the web content accessibility guidelines. In my opinion, following those guidelines are the first place to start. Guidelines are the best practices out there for web development specifically. There are other guidelines out there, such as Universal Design for Learning, allowing for different ways to input answers, allowing learners to have different time extensions. There are connections between UDL and the web guidelines. What's really important within the WCAG are some of the standards in there, and under the understandable, so the 3-point X's, consistent navigation, is one that's really important, because if you are somebody who struggles with trying to remember all of the things all of the time, if you are on a platform or an app that you know what to expect every time you change a page, that is one less thing you have to think about when you're going through. So taking into consideration those guidelines of consistent navigation, plain language, doing your best to speak normally, right? Don't make it overly complicated, because it's harder to comprehend what's happening. The consistent identification of labels or buttons or tools, again, that consistency so that you understand what to expect. One example, again, going back to different invisible disabilities, there are people with autism, and one of the things that I know through my research on autism is that expectation, knowing what's coming next, and that will help to, again, reduce the barriers of the platform so that you can get through the process of what it is you're trying to do, whether that's using an app to order a pizza or using that app in your classroom to get through your classwork.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add to what Erin said with few of the examples on a few more invisible disabilities. So first one we'll be picking up is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. So we all have heard about it, but when you look at it at a first glance, you see a kid roaming around, he's full of energy. You would have come across so many kids and you would have wondered, oh wow, he's so energetic. But after evaluating or talking to the parents, you will come across that he's impacted by ADHD. Now, when we say ADHD, yes, it is one of the invisible disabilities. What are the characters that we see in a person who is impacted by ADHD is that they have very low attention span. They also have learning disorder. Now, when we say attention span and learning disorder, how we are catering to the needs, what we need to do in order to ensure the compliance for these kind of disabilities is that we should have very interactive content, because engaging them, making them sit at a one place is a big task. So that's the reason when we say that we are delivering the interactivity, simulations, or virtual labs along with the content that we create, that helps people to stay connected. It helps them learn with the concept. They easily don't get bored. So all of this needs to be factored in. And similar way, we need to ensure that there is slow learning process. Everything is just not moving rapidly on the screen. So this helps cater to the needs of person impacted by ADHD. Now, the second example I wanted to talk about is, I think Erin has already covered autistic and dyslexic kids. These people are actually, again, have a low attention span. They also have the social communication disorder. They are not easily able to interact, and they are sometimes oversensitive towards the light. So when we say oversensitive towards the light, now what is the solution and recommendation? That's the reason we say that there shouldn't be a flashing content on the screen. We should ensure that the content is easy to absorb. We have an option to replay, so that person with this kind of disorder is able to move through the content in a consistent way. And they can't undergo like a big chunk of content in one go. So that's the reason we have a guideline stating that the all text character count should be limited so that it's easy to absorb in a defined timeline. We're just not stretching the content without any pause. And a few more examples before we move to the next question is that people, Anjali, you would have seen people parking their cars in a disabled zone. And at a first glance, you will say that, oh, he looks absolutely normal. Why is he doing that? Might be he is impacted by Parkinson's. Now, when we say Parkinson's, their body part continues to shake. And during the entire day of 24 hours, he can go just numb for a few seconds. So might be he's not able to park a car in a full parking zone area, which is okay. That's the reason we say that Invisible disabilities needs to be factored in. So all these criteria at first go need to be taken into consideration. We shouldn't be assuming anything without looking and analyzing the stuff.
And
Absolutely.
to add on that, when you're talking about, not assuming, not only does that go for the products we produce, it also goes for the people we work with and who we encounter in an everyday situation. So your conversation around the parking space one is a really great one, because again, you don't know why somebody parked in a disabled zone, and it's okay. You don't need to know. There's no requirement out there that says, I need to have a placard that says, this is why I'm here. And, to me, when it comes to talking about accessibility and inclusivity, it's really about accepting people for who they are and making sure that we are being sensitive to everybody, and just when it comes down to it, being good humans, right? Doing what we can to say, you know what? I don't know if you have a hard time listening to me, so I'm going to make sure that I give you this written transcript to go along with this. Or if we have a classwork assignment that we need to do, that if you need extra time and I don't care, that's great. If you had a question about what did we learn, I want to be there to help you understand, and vice versa. I don't know the best way for me to learn is not the best way for you to learn. So the best way is what works for you. And what we want to be doing as producers of digital content and platforms is being thoughtful of the best way for everyone, being inclusive, and doing our best to put that first foot forward. And I apologize if this might jump into your next question, but one of the things I wanted to touch on too is some of those challenges, right? So again, sorry, Ange, if I took away your thunder there, but those challenges from an educational, a technology perspective, which is where Magic, is coming from at many times, we have a lot of places where products were done a few years ago. We call those legacy products, right? And technology moves faster than other things. So there is always going to be this catching up period to try to find a way to take something that's been done, fix it in a way that will reach more students, but most importantly, thinking about how to help build new things to be inclusive from the start. And that's, Tarveen and I, we were talking about, you don't do your visual design at the very end of a product development. So you shouldn't be doing considerations for accessibility, thinking about those web content guidelines, thinking about UDL. Want to pull all of that in the beginning stages. Do usability testing with all types of abilities throughout the process. And, from a challenge in doing that is time, resources, right, budget, and it can be difficult to do that, but it's really important to understand when you're in a place where you have multiple things, new builds, old builds, in between builds, what needs to happen to fix those pieces, and what do we need to think about moving forward so we're not in this continuous cycle of having to go back and fix things.
Right, of course. Tarveen, are there some challenges that you want to outline as well?
I think we have covered almost all of them. Yes, I agree to what Erin said. The biggest challenge is shift in the mindset. And I'll share two examples here. Whenever I talk to people, they always say that, will I be impacted by lawsuit? So why are we worried about lawsuits only? Why aren't we thinking about inclusion for all? That's the vision we all should carry. It's not always about lawsuits. So we have seen in the past, if I take example of Orkut, so they didn't change with the change in technology. Why we don't want to be future ready and competitive? I've seen everyone talking that I want to be a competitor. I want to play like a billionaire in next 10 years. For that, we need to be future ready. We need to adapt the new technology. when we say new technology, we have always seen new technology comes with the accessibility guidelines available for ease of use for everyone. So accessibility guidelines are no more like a generic terminologies being used and people are interpreting differently. We have lot of stuff there in the market now we can relate to, we can talk about, and it shouldn't be an afterthought. And the second example is the flash content. When we had a complete deadline and people started saying it will get closed and shut down altogether, we started a shift in the thought process. People started talking about, I want to be competitive, still want to be there in the market. And then started saying, let's convert the flash content into HTML and ensure accessibility is in place. So why we wait for everything to come at an end and don't be a proactive member in the society who aim towards achieving the compliance and inclusion? Once we have that vision and the discipline, we will be able to achieve what we want to achieve. Still, we have seen the lawsuits are increasing like anything in last few months. I think Erin would have that information. She shared with me. We looked at that data, and to our surprise, we have seen that still many of the companies lack the basic compliance. And they're even not worried about it.
Yeah, and I think that you had a really good point, Tarveen, is let's not sit around and wait to see if we get sued. And I know that that is the reality of many places, but if again, we're taking that step to be inclusive, to think upfront about accessibility, to do the usability testing with different abilities, not just thinking, okay, accessibility means, can I do this with a screen reader? Can I do this with a keyboard? There's so much more to it as we're, outlining. And the shift in the mindset is always a challenge, right? It's always hard to learn a new way of thinking, and it can sometimes feel like you're moving a mountain stone by stone. And while it does seem to take a while, at some point you turn around and see the pile of stones you have built behind you and the impact that you have made. And it's really important to remember as we're moving forward with the new guidelines. There's standards for WCAG 2.2 AA are coming out in a few soon. W3C should be releasing those soon. And the reason it's taken so long for them to release them is because they are doing their due diligence to do the user testing, to get feedback from people in various arenas, so that as we're considering how are we building going forward, we're looking again, not just at what we would call a visible disability, but how are we taking into consideration those who don't have those disabilities that quote unquote stand out to somebody.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so now we're going to jump into our last poll and kind of see how much you guys have learned from this little talk. So this question is, which of these invisible disabilities were you unaware of prior to this session? All righty, let's see the results.
We have a response in Q&A by Lee, and she said she knows all.
Oh, okay. All right, so it looks like dysgraphia was the one that was most largely picked, but all in all, we are just glad that you got some information from this and learned about any of them or all of them.
Yes, and when we talk about dysgraphia, I know people will not be aware of this term unless you have gone through the CPA-CC content. So dysgraphia is when not able to understand the graphical content is, and you are impacted. And no one really understands that why it happens, why people are not able to relate to the information in the graphs. We end up labeling them as they are not as good as they are required to be in a math content. But the reason is pretty more different. So we need to understand all the disabilities and needs. That's the reason we put up these 4 different pointers. We know that people are aware of chronic illness, ADHD, and depression, but dysgraphia and dyscalculia, similar way calculation, people are not able to understand the calculation very easily. It's okay to carry a calculator along. No one is stopping, but yes, we need to understand the needs first.
Of course.
Yeah, and one of the, oh, sorry, and one of the things through the Q&A box from from Leah is, it is important to note that what works for one person may not work for another person. And the example she shared in the box was about some people that she works with find captions to be challenged. So it's important for them to be able to turn them off. And I think that just goes back to the conversation around thinking about what works for one doesn't work for another. And the important thing about accessibility is being able to have those options. And that also ties back to some of the concepts around universal design and being able to have multiple ways to interact with something. And that's really important because, again, you don't know how people are, what works best for each person. And another thing that is also something to consider is it is extremely hard to be everything for everyone all the time, and that's okay. One of my colleagues in the accessibility world, Meryl Evans, has a phrase that's, progress over perfection. And I think that's one of the things I kind of live by when we're talking accessibility, because it is the ultimate goal to be quote unquote 100% accessible. But that is extremely hard. The most important thing is to be aware of where the gaps are, be aware of things you may not understand. So hopefully from this conversation, you've learned things that you didn't know prior to joining. And now you can take that information and think, hey, am I doing this? That progress, that one new thing you learn every day when you're talking about accessibility, you have 365 new things by the end of the year. And if you keep considering implementing each of those on a slow but steady basis, helping your friends, be an ally to others, the more that we learn and the more that we can share, the more everybody benefits.
Absolutely. Alrighty. So do we want to talk about a little bit of some of the key takeaways that we got from today? Erin, would you like to start?
I was going to let Tarveen start, but sure. Hopefully through today, again, you've learned at least one new thing that you didn't know about an invisible disability, whether it is the actual definition through one of the websites or about a disability that you didn't consider before. Tarveen, I'm going to let you take the rest of them.
Sure. Thank you. So I think the first one covered by Erin absolutely makes sense. And the second one, the biggest takeaway is that please don't associate everything to dollar. End of day, implementing accessibility would result into a lot of saving, lot of growth, lot of revenue, and lot of user base. So we should aim for the inclusion for all, for everyone, and accessibility first approach. As we have already shared, that design review doesn't starts from the end of the project. Similar way, we need to ensure that we have the accessibility built right into the system. We are talking about born accessible products, and our vision, company vision, should be aligned to accessibility. Once we have all of this in place, I think shift in mindset would automatically be there. As Erin said, that it's not easy to have a shift in mindset, but I think having all of these aligned will surely help us achieve that goal.
Absolutely. So now to go on to some of the audience questions. We got this one from Ashok a little bit ago. Any examples of invisible disabilities? We talked a little bit about autism, ADHD, Parkinson's. Tarveen, do you have any others to add?
Yes, I have one more that I wanted to bring. I was interviewing one of the lady a few days ago, and I got to know one of other invisible disabilities that is related to the brain injury. Now, as we know that chronic illness, as per the data by CDC, 6 out of 10 people are impacted by chronic illness. When we say chronic illness, yes, it is related to the people impacted by might be uh, uh, normal health issues, illness, and few disorders, or might be he's diabetic. But yes, I came across one of the new terminology that says that hydrocephalus. Now, what is hydrocephalus? Hydrocephalus is a kind of a fluid that continues to build up in your brain, and when it builds up, you start like losing your senses. When we say senses, is that you would have speech disorder, you would have loss of memory and all of that stuff. So what needs to be catered to, I got to know while talking to her. She said that we need to have the accessible content so that I can use the screen reader when I'm not up to my full strength. I can still write down email, I would have ease of use. So I think we have already covered lot many. There are almost like 100 plus invisible disabilities. And as far as the college analysis that I have shared, they said that there 80% of the people are impacted by invisible disability. So look at the overall strength. I would expect that everyone on the globe might have gone through the invisible disability once in a lifetime. So we need to ensure that these are being taken into consideration. And I would completely echo to what Lee said, that everything can't be benefited to everyone or can't be an accommodation for each type of disability. But let's try to build up that impact and have an alternative mechanism while we deliver the product to the platform.
Of course. So our next question is from Edwin. What are some tools so I can make my website accessible?
Oh, yes. Okay, when we talk about tools, yes, we do have many tools. We have tools like Accessibility Insights, we have tools like Arc Toolkit, we have tools like Axie, but trust me, guys, these only help us achieve 20 to 30%, max 40% of the compliance. We will leave remaining 70% of the WCAG success criteria that will help achieve the compliance and the overall product quality. We end up losing that. So having the mix of automated tools like the ones that I have shared, plus getting the audit done manually, and also ensure to include people with disabilities during your review process. That will help you achieve what we want to achieve and have inclusion. The feedback of people with disabilities play a very vital role. We have a very right feedback at right stage of the product. So having them onboarded plays a very vital role in the success of your product. So combination of these three, automated tool, manual approach, and people with disabilities, will add a 5 rating to your product and a good star rating on the websites and the application portals.
100%. And Edwin's next question was, what is your favorite website that shows best practices of accessibility?
We have always been following the W3C website. They have a lot of good examples. I think that's the go-to place for everyone. And I also go through few of the courses that are there on the Udemy that help me understand and analyze what's new in the market, how the new tech stack is interconnected to the usability, how I can implement the solution when I'm building a product in React, or when I'm building a product in Angular or a mobile application. So I think the go-to place is W3C website, but yes, there are 10 other places which we look forward to when we do analyze or provide the consulting to any of the complex problem statement.
Sure. Erin, did you want to add anything to that? Alrighty. And Stephen asked, are there any best practices for creating graphics to make them accessible?
Yes, when we talk about graphics, yes, there are many guidelines. First one talks about the color contrast of the design that you create. You need to ensure that you are compliant. The colors are easy to absorb. If I am a person with disability, I'm not able to see the red color, there should be an alternative mechanism. Then the first was color. The second one is ensure that you are not conveying all the information through the colors. For example, you have a pie chart and you have legends next to it, and you have said that US current population is 10% of the world population, but you haven't mentioned US on the pie chart. You've just mentioned 10%. If I am a colorblind user and I try to see the content in a grayscale mode, it will not make sense to me. So try ensuring the information is not only conveyed through color branding. And the third pointer is that avoid using images of text. Don't add the content to the graphics that you are creating. We need to ensure that the content is accessible through the screen reader. Having the image for that content will not help us. So these are the three guidelines, and please ensure to get the wireframes reviewed before you actually put those designs in the product itself. Then that will be a additional costs. So we need to factor in what needs to be evaluated from accessibility standpoint. So design is the phase where we focus on the color contrast and all of that stuff.
All righty. It looks like those are all of our questions for right now. Does anyone have any last minute questions for us that we can answer? I'll wait just a minute to see. Oh, and Ashok asked, for graphics, we also need to take care of alt text.
Yes, we need to have alt text added to the graphics wherever required. In case it's a decorative image, we can just leave the alt as blank. But for rest of the images, we should have, and we should take into consideration that we have a character limit for alt. And if it's a complex image, we should have the long description added along with the alt text, so that's easy to convey and absorb.
Absolutely. All righty. It looks like that is everything that we have for today. So you can check your inbox after this for the recording of this session if you want to note anything down. And we can't wait to see you at the next event where we'll be discussing how to avoid common errors made during audits, and we'll send out the info about the time and date when we solidify everything. But thank you all so much for joining Erin, Tarveen, and I. Erin sends her apologies. She had a little power outage. But yeah, we're so excited that we finally got the first Magically Live underway, and we can't wait to see you guys next time.
And one last note, thank you so much, guys. And thanks for asking the question. I think two-way communication really helps. And we are happy to have you all. On the end note, I just wanted to share that we have seen people celebrating a GAD with full Entho, and it is being celebrated on third Thursday of May every year. And we see a lot of posts on the LinkedIn, a lot of activity happening around. So I just wanted to bring it to your notice that similar way we have an association who take cares of invisible disabilities, that is IDA. The way that does it, IDA also does a weekly kind of a thing that happens like in October from 16 to 22 every year. That's Invisible Disability Association. That also helps you promote awareness around accessibility, the needs of invisible disability, and all of that stuff. So let's take a place that will celebrate the IDA the way we do for GAD, and will spread a lot of awareness in the LE world.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye all. Bye.